Well, good evening, members. Using my quick calculator by eye, and Kimberly, I can see that we're all here. Those of us who are here are expected to be here and are here. So thank you for that. And to those of you on the internet, welcome to this meeting of the New Eastern Committee. My name is Paul Rivers, and I chair this committee. Let me start the meeting by confirming those present are members of the committee. Let's do it formally, Kimberly. Everybody here is, everybody, it's not just me, is it?
Everybody is present, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I am supported this evening by officers Louise Jones, who is planning solicitor?
Louise Jones.
Right.
Planning solicitor, yes, Chairman.
Beth Howland-Smith, development manager. Catherine Pearson, area team leader. Alex Inglis, senior planning officer. Tracy Farthing, planning officer. Wanda Yanaki, planning officer. And Kimberly Sohn, Democratic Services Officer, who is clerking the meeting and will endeavour to keep me in order, for which I am truly grateful. Guests, thank you for being here. And members, let me remind you that you should keep your statements brief and to the point. We will be timing speeches this evening, and an alarm will sound when you have been speaking for 4 minutes, which should be enough for anybody. I've probably spoken for more than 4 minutes already. Time for you to close me down then. So, agenda item number 1. Apologies for absence and substitutions. Kimberly, are there any?
We have apologies from absence from Councillor Joan Hegan, who will be substituted by Councillor Christine Baker, and Councillor David Else, the Vice Chairman, who will be substituted by Councillor Val Henry.
Great, thank you. Item 2, minutes of the last meeting. Committee, would you confirm the minutes of the meeting held on 9th of June 2021, which have been published on the Council's website? Do you so agree?
Agreed.
Agreed. Item 3, declarations of interest. Kimberly, have any declarations of interest been received?
None received prior to the meeting, Chairman.
Members, anything you need to mention now? Good, okay. Item 4, questions by members of the public. Kimberly, have we had any?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. And 5, questions by members. Are there any?
None received, Chairman.
We're doing very well. That's good. And if I may ask Beth, are there any relevant updates to government guidance or legislation since our last meeting? Beth?
Sorry, Chairman. I think we're expecting Zach Elwood to join us to provide some updates to members. I'm not sure if he's still in the waiting room. Kimberly, would you mind checking, please?
Yeah, he's just joining us. Do you want to ask that, Chairman?
Zach, would you be able to update us on any relevant government guidance or legislation since our last meeting?
Yeah, just 2 very brief updates. Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, just the Minister's notification around Article 4 directions in planning. Effectively, whilst the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, hasn't actually been updated yet, they have announced that they will be updating this with new wording for Article 4 directions, which will effectively make it more difficult to implement Article 4 directions, which would need to be approved by the Secretary of State. Effectively, what they're saying is that that any Article 4 directions will be need to be targeted and well evidenced, so there's a clear justification, and that they should only apply to the smallest geographical area possible. the wording of the wording of the MPPF will be updated accordingly in the future, but it does say that Article 4 directions that cover the entirety of a local authority area are unlikely to be supported. So really, they're wanting us to very much focus in on specific issues. So the message is very much Article 4 directions should be exception rather than the rule. The only other thing I thought it would be useful to update on is our current position with 5-year land supply. Members may well be aware of the appeal decision for a site at Lower Webburn Lane in Badshot Lee, where the inspector concluded that we had a 4.26 year, or was likely we had a 4.26 year land supply. We are working hard at the moment on our 21 statement with a base date of April the 1st, 2021, but for the time being, until that's published, we have on a number of other applications recently accepted the inspector's conclusions in terms of 5-year land supply, i.e. that we're unable to demonstrate a 5-year land supply at the moment. We're using the figure that the inspector concluded on for the time being, and we'll update members as soon as our new 5-year land supply position statement has been updated. It's likely to change from 4.26, but whether or not it will be over 5 or not, I just don't know at the moment. But at the moment, we're accepting that on appropriate sites outside of the green belt, the tilted balance is engaged. Thank you. I think that's all I have updates for at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach. Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Cotter, please.
Just on the Article 4 proposal that you outlined to us, Zach, could I just check whether there is any intention to review existing and agreed Article 4 areas, or are you talking about new applications?
My understanding from reading the MHCLG guidance is that it would only apply to new Article 4 directions, so that our existing Article 4 directions that are in place in certain areas, including the most recent one in Godalming on the industrial estate, would remain for the time being. The MPF is specifically talking about future applications for Article 4, so I think we're safe on existing ones for the time being.
Thank you, and thank you, Chairman.
Okay, pleasure. Any more questions for Zach? All right, thank you. Thanks, Zach. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on then to applications for planning permission and those subject to public speaking. And the first one tonight is WA 2020-1975, Brooklands Farm, Pepperbox Lane, Bramley. The proposal is the erection of a dwelling and associated works, together with demolition of existing barn and landscaping works to include a pond. Now I think Tracy is going to take us through. Tracy?
Thank you, Chairman. The Chairman just explained the proposal. The application site is located in a rural location approximately 600 metres east of Horsham Road, accessed from Pepperbox Lane, as shown in this image. The site is situated within the Greenbelt and within an area of great landscape value. At present, the site comprises a converted historic barn, as shown in the bottom left image, which is attached via a glazed link to a large ancillary annex building known as the Mega Barn to its east. To the north of the main dwelling is a further out building containing garaging, which was a former stable building. The existing property is served by residential garden to both the north and the south of the existing dwelling. In addition, there are 2 modern agricultural barns. These are used for storage. The site is not actively used for farming and has not been for many years. A recent agricultural survey concluded that the land classification was 3B and that the land could not be considered as the most versatile agricultural land. It's not capable of consistently producing moderate to high yields of crops. The new dwelling would be positioned fairly centrally within an open field to the east of the existing farmhouse. This field has recently been left untouched by the applicants and has self-propagated into a rich meadow. This was evident at the site visit undertaken yesterday morning by myself and members. This slide shows a panoramic view of the site from the south, essentially where the pond would be, across towards the north. This seeks to aid members who are unable to attend the site visit to put the site into some sort of context. The proposed dwelling, as already stated, would be located fairly centrally within the site. A pond would be constructed to the south, where the land is naturally lower. Extensive planting of woodland is proposed mainly to areas to the north of the new dwelling and the east, and also to areas surrounding the existing agricultural buildings. The new dwelling would be set over 2 floors above ground, with a basement housing a cellar and a plant room, and would have an internal floor area of approximately 1,185 metres squared. The internal layout, sorry, can everyone hear me? Super. The internal layout allows for leisure and living accommodation on the ground floor. This includes a gym, a pool, garaging, as well as the kitchen, dining and living areas. The first floor is reserved for sleeping and working spaces, with various terraces and balconies throughout the first floor. The dwelling is modern in form, featuring flat planted roof spaces integrated with solar panels. The main materials consist of limestone to the ground floor level, with timber, in this instance poplar, at first floor level, which would weather to a soft grey colour. Amenity areas are provided by more private walled gardens and smaller spaces immediately adjacent to the house. Beyond these, wall structures spread out into the more natural landscapes beyond. The application has been submitted with great emphasis on paragraph 79 of the NPPF. As you will have seen within my report, this states that the development of isolated homes in the countryside should be resisted unless one or more of some following criteria apply. Criteria E being that the design is of exceptional quality, in that it is truly outstanding or innovative and would significantly enhance its immediate setting. The proposed design has received praise from an independent design review body, Design Southeast, who are formed of experts in their field. This journey has been fairly long, with several meetings, discussions and iterations of this design, and has concluded in the proposal that you see before you this evening. The underlying concept of 3 main elements of woodland, meadow and water, which help to ensure the development is responsive to the characteristics of this site, receives specific praise. Design Southeast concluded that in their opinion, this is a truly outstanding proposal, is sensitive to the defining characters of the area, and does propose significant enhancements to its setting. The proposal has also gained some praise from the AONB advisor. Whilst the site doesn't fall within the AONB, it may be seen from advantages nearby, which are within that designation. The building has a low profile, responds to site topography, takes into account local materials and keeps light pollution to a minimum. Enhancements come from the removal of the large barn, planting of over 1 hectare of woodland, the creation of a pond which would enhance biodiversity, and in turn it's considered that the proposal raises the standards of design. It was noted on the site visit that the field is currently a natural meadow of its own accord, having not been sown at all, and measuring approximately 1.5 hectares. The proposal would seek to retain or restore approximately 2/3 of that meadow to the east of the new dwelling, and also introduces 1.2 hectares of woodland to the west, This is shown on this image with the red line outline showing the extent of the existing meadow versus the proposed meadow to the east of the dwelling and the proposed woodland to the west. Additionally, brown roofs would also provide opportunity for flora and fauna to flourish. Whilst the design scheme doesn't intend on being innovative for the purposes of paragraph 79, it's worth noting that the design proposes to deliver a zero carbon home through the use of passive and active means. The orientation of the dwelling and the design ensures that in winter months, the benefits of solar gain can be harnessed, whilst also ensuring that, particularly on the southern elevation, the summer sun is obscured by the overhang of the roof, preventing overheating in the summer and preventing a reliance on mechanical heating. Other features also include the use of ground source heat pumps, excellent insulation, high performance glazing, natural ventilation, and so on. This slide has been added in order to demonstrate some of the key distances and features of the site. There will be approximately 25 metres between the new dwelling and the pond. The new dwelling will be sited over 100 metres to the closest boundary of the closest neighbour. And these blue lines depict nearby footpaths and bridleways. The key matters for consideration are whether the scheme complies with the criteria of paragraph 79, and if it does, whether this alone or in addition to other elements represent very special circumstances to outweigh any harm to the greenbelt as a result of inappropriate development and also residential amenity. Thank you, Chairman.
Now, members, we have two speakers on this tonight. Mr. Carnell, who's coming in.
He's on Zoom, Chair.
Okay. And Mr. Shaw. Mr. Carnell, may I take you first? Yeah, just to remind you, you have 4 minutes.
My name is Paul Carnell and I'm a planning consultant from Stratton Parker. I've worked as a planner for more than 13 years and have much experience working within the Greenbelt. I'm representing Catherine O, the adjoining neighbour to the application site, in addition to a number of other residents who live locally within Pepperbox Lane. This includes those at Pepperbox Cottage, Tinkers Hall and numbers 1 and 2 Brooklands Farm Cottage. Planning decisions ultimately come down to a judgment on the weight given to policy and material considerations when considering the planning balance. Members will be just as aware as I that national planning policy directs local planning authorities to place substantial weight against inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. Development is considered inappropriate unless certain exceptions are met. None of these exceptions are met at Brooklands Farm, and therefore the proposed development is, by definition, inappropriate. The next question is whether very special circumstances, or VSC, exist which could outweigh this substantial weight the council is directed to apply against the proposed development. The VSC test is, by necessity, very tough to pass. The VSC case before you is substantially made up of the quality of the proposed design and specifically the officer's conclusion that the proposal meets the tests under paragraph 79 of the NPPF, which allows for isolated homes in the countryside where the design is outstanding or innovative. As noted in the officer's report, paragraph 79 is not a Greenbelt exception policy. Rather, it exists to clarify what development can take place outside of settlement boundaries. The key here is what constitutes isolated in this context. If a site is not isolated, it follows that paragraph 79 is irrelevant. Braintree is the leading case on what isolated means in this context. When the case came before the Court of Appeal, Lord Justice Lindblom concluded that isolated means a dwelling that is physically separate or remote from a settlement. Importantly, he stated there's no definition given in the NPPF for settlement, and in his view, a settlement would not necessarily exclude a hamlet or a cluster of dwellings. Brooklands Farmhouse would remain should development be granted. Brooklands, my client's property, is a short distance to the north and has grounds directly abutting the application site. Further, in order to access the application site, one must pass the other houses I mentioned earlier. This cluster of houses all once formed Brooklands Farm. They are historically associated as a single entity, and there is a community of people still resident whom this development would affect. Furthermore, there are 4 other dwellings nearby, and which are connected by a short footpath to Pepperbox Lane. There's also Ridinghurst Farm to the south at the end of the lane. According to Lord Justice Lindblom, this cluster of dwellings, this small community, can be considered a settlement. The application site is therefore not isolated. Paragraph 79 should not be considered in the balance of this application. The weight afforded to it should fall away when balancing it against the substantial weight given to inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. The remaining VSC matters relate to measures to mitigate the proposed development and cannot be afforded significant weight. The matter of light pollution is not raised by the council as a particular problem, and no critical assessment of this has been provided. Ultimately, this comes back to weight. The officer's report has inappropriately placed far too much weight on the design credentials. The development will result in a brand new dwelling located in the middle of a field in the Greenbelt, increasing the volume and footprint of built form compared to the existing. The case for VSC has not been met and does not come close to balancing the substantial weight against this application by virtue of it being inappropriate development, harmful to the Greenbelt and Greenbelt openness. The application should therefore be refused. Thank you for your time.
And Mr. Shaw, if I may call on you. Yeah, if you'd like to take that place, use the microphone and press the button in the middle.
Okay.
And you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, councillors. I'm here to speak in support of the application for a new dwelling on our land at Brooklands Farm. I'm firstly going to read a statement prepared by the planning consultants who are unable to attend this evening. Their statement deals principally with the status of the application in policy terms, and I'll then follow with our own personal statement. The proposed development has been designed to accord with the requirements of paragraph 79, all of which Tracy has amply described, but I'll just repeat some of it if I may, which allows new dwellings in the countryside providing certain criteria are met. A great deal of work has been undertaken by the development team to ensure this is achieved, and the scheme will raise the standards of design within the borough. This application follows on from a number of permissions that have been granted for similar projects for new dwellings in Waverley. And the support of your officers indicates that in the right circumstance, the council is supportive of contemporary design in rural locations. In this case, the design of the house has been through many rounds of meetings with the design panel of the Design Panel Southeast, with changes made at each stage to address comments. The outcome is a scheme which has the wholehearted support of all parties, such that your officers are recommending approval is given. In terms of the requirement that the development significantly enhances its immediate setting, the project offers a series of benefits, including the removal of 12,200 square feet of habitable floor space in the mega barn, extensive new woodland planting and wildflower meadow, and ongoing restoration of the existing stream, pond and ditches. Overall, the scheme will result in the significant enhancement to biodiversity of the immediate and wider setting. The site lies within the Greenbelt, where new residential development is not normally considered appropriate except for these special circumstances. In this case, the outstanding nature of the development, quality of design, quality of proposed landscaping, and the removal of the mega barn will combine to create the special circumstances required to justify development. Accordingly, your officers are satisfied the development is appropriate within the Greenbelt, a view supported by the applicant's legal advisor. In summary, we believe the proposal accords in totally with the requirements of the NPPF and the Waverley local plan. If I may, I'll now move on to our personal statement. Some years ago now, we decided we needed to move south to be near our children and grandchildren. As closely as possible, we wanted to find something similar to our home of 44 years in the Great Ouse Valley of the North Bedfordshire. A farmland location without buildings and a source of water. This would enable us to continue our passion for trees and plants and to promote fauna and flora, all as we had done where we lived before. And secondly, and most importantly, a situation where we could build a retirement home for us both, which had to be eco-friendly, modern, creating biodiversity, and which we wanted would represent a local exemplar of its type. About 4 years ago, after a very long search, we found Brooklands Farm. Before I finish, there are two particular points I'd like to make, please, which are, the first thing the panel of experts is that the proposed new building had to be located away from the existing house in a position that befits a paragraph 79 building. And secondly, right from the start, we worked closely with our architect and our landscape designer, the very experienced and renowned Tom Stewart-Smith, whom some of you may know, to develop a building proposal and landscape that are fully unified, work together, and that really resonate with the surrounding site. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you. Members, you will see in your papers that the officer's recommendation is that permission be granted subject to conditions 1 to 16 and informatives 1 to 6. May I take questions or comments? Councillor Cossar.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I have to say, I went on the site visit yesterday. I found it really interesting, and I'd like to just first of all thank Tracy for adding some material in at our request, which gave you perhaps a better impression than you would have had otherwise of the extent and nature of the meadowland there, which was of a very high quality indeed. I mean, I do note that, you know, that apparently there was a proposal to replace 2/3 of that, and of course we're getting extra woodland, so maybe that just about equates, but it was just so impressive that my initial impression was I'd be so sad to see it not being used, continuing that usage. That said, I'm pretty undecided about which way I'm going to vote on this, frankly, I have to say, and to help me, I'd like just initially to ask one or two things of the officers, if I might. I have listened carefully to the point about the isolation and actually looked up some of the judgment and the law and so on. I think this is quite a tricky one actually, because there clearly is some evidence that could be construed as there being a provision of a settlement in this area. Indeed, in my trip to the site visit yesterday, I actually went into the adjoining property by mistake, and it is quite close, and there are other properties in the area, and I think I would like some further comment from the officers in response to the points that were made to us by the adjoining owner in respect of that legal judgment and whether or not we are properly interpreting that. I have noted what they've said in the report, but I think the challenge suggests that we need some further response from our officers on that. And in the same way, the issue of light pollution, I don't really know how relevant that is or not. But again, because it isn't effectively covered and it has been used as a challenge, I would like to hear from our officers on that as well. Finally, right at the centre of this, potentially, if we accept the settlement point, is the whole issue of whether this is outstanding or innovative design. And I would just like some further comment as well about how we really judge these things. I don't feel capable of judging it. I'm a traditionalist, actually. I don't like most modern buildings, and I like some, but not most, and I'm not particularly enamoured of the design I've seen here, but that's not the point. That's not what I'm here for as a member of the planning committee. But if that is going to be crucial ultimately to our decision, I'd like a better understanding of whether there's, you know, some hierarchy of opinion here, in a sense. I mean, there are all sorts of grand sounding groups out there who, you know, may be expressing an opinion. I'd like a little bit more understanding of, you know, how valid that is. You know, are there higher levels of input and comment we could have, because to be blunt, it could be quite easy, I think, almost for anyone to find themselves a nice site in a rural area and get a group of experts, quote unquote, to say, you know, it's really an innovative design. And I just want some reassurance on that point. That's it for now, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Tracy, on those 3 points, could you give us guidance, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, Councillor Coster, I didn't get point 2 initially. Was it?
Point 2 was about light pollution. The point was made
so.
that hadn't been covered, and it was suggested that this is a relevant consideration, and we hadn't considered it. I'm not suggesting that is or isn't true. I just want a response to that, really.
No, that's fine. Thank you. So, within my report, I assessed whether I thought that this site was an isolated dwelling. It's not situated within any settlement boundary. It is, in terms of distance, away from other dwellings. It's got limited infrastructure in terms of public transport. There's no shops or anything nearby. So, culmination of lots of things have made me come to the conclusion that it's an isolated dwelling in the countryside. In terms of the light pollution, the application has actually been given some praise by the AONB advisor, who has raised the fact that this would not cause light pollution. The fenestration details, the overhangs of the roof, and the detailing has all sort of mitigated against light pollution. That's without any screening internally from any blinds or anything. Nothing like that is proposed as of yet, or included in the design. And in terms of whether it's outstanding or not, the design review panel are made up of experts in their field, which include architect, landscape architect, an engineering and sustainability person, and so they're an independent body. So we do take note of their comments. We also have an internal design. I'm not sure of her exact job title.
Sorry, our design officer, Sarah Wells.
Sorry. And I've sought advice from Sarah Wells, and she's of the opinion that we would be really hard stretched to go against the conclusion of Design Southeast.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Tracy, thank you very much. And I'll take Councillor Townsend next, and Councillor Darcy, and George, right? Okay, and Councillor Wilson. So, slow but not quick, sorry. Liz, Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. Looking through the application, there did seem to be a comment from the lead local flood authority, and they did recommend some conditions. And I'm not sure, I might have missed them, but I just want to double check, Tracy, that they are actually on the application there. I looked through, and actually the officer's report, the sustainability bit was quite brief, but obviously you've outlined a lot more on the sustainability side tonight. Looking through the application, there were comments about potentially a biodigester, and I just want to perhaps clarify if this is not going on mains sewage, and that there will be a biodigester, and if that is the case, where the effluent from that might be being discharged into because there may be a requirement for a discharge permit from the Environment Agency on that side. So we may have to, perhaps, I'm not sure whether a condition is possible, but potentially an informative, perhaps at least on that. But perhaps we could clarify that. Obviously, the fact that it has got a swimming pool, which is really energy intensive, does make it achieving the zero carbon is going to be fairly difficult. So again, I wondered whether or not, if we are going to approve it, and I haven't made my mind up at this stage, but I just want to ask whether or not it is possible to add an informative about the sustainability, about the zero carbon, and say about trying to achieve the, heading towards either the best sustainability standards or zero carbon within that. I am mindful of Councillor Cossett and what he said, about the actual building itself and its the quality. And and whilst myself, I thought it was a very attractive building, I just want to be assured that the loss of the mega barn, is that included in the balance that you are using to decide that it is possible to build this within the green belt? Because obviously there could be an opportunity for anyone, as Councillor Cossett said, to purchase a greenfield and build something almost exactly the same, and we'd have to say, well, that's a good quality design. So if I could have an answer to that would be really helpful as well. Thank you, Tracy.
Tracy, always difficult questions, eh? 2 questions, I think, from Liz. Can you comment?
So first of all, I am the lead local flood authority. When I have a moment, I will check whether those conditions have been included. Quickly flicking through it, may be that I've missed them off, and they can be included on any permission that is granted this evening. Again, for the biodigester, that's something I will need to check through the submission documents. And again, if that is proposed within the scheme, then it would be, or it could be deemed as acceptable to put on a condition or an informative to deal with that. And in terms of the barn, the Design Southeast, the review team, they said that the demolition of the barn did significantly enhance the area. So I think it is within the planning balance, and it is within the balance of whether this is an acceptable scheme in the Greenbelt. But then I think also that it's part and parcel of the whole scheme. So we have the erection of a new dwelling, together with the demolition of the existing barn, the landscape, the creation of the pond, creation of the woodland. So the whole scheme together is what's proposed. So we have to take everything as to whether that conforms to the criteria of paragraph 79E.
Okay.
And this, sorry, Chair. And the sustainability criteria, is it possible to, because that is, from my weighing things up, that is a big sort of plus for me, and whether or not there is any way of including that in some kind of, possibly not a condition, but maybe an informative, Tracy?
This was your first point, Councillor Townsend, I think, wasn't it? No? Okay.
I would need to confer with Kat whether that was a reasonable condition to attach to the permission.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I may comment on that briefly. I think we would struggle to condition that requirement. we would struggle to have a policy basis to do that, and obviously that's not part of the argument that the applicant is making. But I think it would not be unreasonable to put an informative on, and certainly the information that is before us this evening seems to indicate, you know, the applicant's desire to achieve zero carbon. So it would not be unreasonable to put a informative on to that effect, to encourage the applicant to do that. There was a couple of other points that I can maybe just add to what Tracy said to you already, members. Apologies, we haven't, by the look, included the Leeds Local Flood Authority condition, so we would recommend inclusion of an additional condition to cover that. And I believe the swimming pool would be heated from one of the renewable energy sources. I overheard Councillor Darcy's conversation with the architect at the end of the site visit, and that seemed to be what the architect was indicating, that the swimming pool energy that required to heat it would be from some of the renewable sources incorporated into the dwelling. I hope that helps, Councillor Townsend.
Thanks, Kat. Councillor Townsend, you okay so far with that?
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Darcy.
Thank you, Chair. I like the design, and I commend the fact that it's very sustainable, and there's a lot of effort to make it as eco-friendly as possible. I did have a discussion with the architect, and he did explain about the heating of the swimming pool and various other factors which were all in the, I think, design and access statement. And it's all very up to the minute and green. So that's all good. The two questions for me are whether the building is whether the building being outstanding under section 79 is relevant to it being appropriate development in the green belt. So that's the first question. In other words, is that relevant at all to making very special circumstances? Because they seem to be two separate issues to me. And the second thing is, just a curiosity really, regarding the quality of the agricultural land, I was wondering how much land in Surrey would be of a higher grade, and how typical this land is actually of most agricultural land in Surrey.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Darcy. Well, I'll throw myself on Tracy's deep knowledge in this area. And personally, not being a farmer, there were nice butterflies there, weren't there? Sorry, Tracy.
Firstly, I don't know how much of Surrey is 3B or 3A, sorry. However, in response to the other question, which was outstanding development versus very special circumstances, there was an interesting submission detail with the application from QC Sasha White, which concludes that if a development is concluded to meet paragraph 79E of the NPPF, then it absolutely can be considered as a matter of planning judgment to constitute individually or in combination with other factors very special circumstances.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, Councillor Darcy, follow up, yes?
I did read that, but I just wondered, not being a legal person, whether a statement from a QC constitutes anything in terms of actual legal opinion.
Okay.
From a legal point of view, Tracy or Zach?
Can I come back in, please? Yeah. So there were two distinctions there. There was a bit of a mix-up because someone was talking about very special circumstances being overcoming inappropriate development. Well, yes, it is inappropriate development. I think everyone's accepting it's inappropriate development within the green belt. So they are very much reliant on paragraph 79 as being very special circumstances. We have, I must admit, my previous experience of paragraph 79 homes has exclusively been outside of the green belt. But we did look into this as officers, and we can see no reason why it shouldn't apply to areas within the green belt as well. There's nothing in paragraph 79 that says that it doesn't. The test is whether it's an isolated building in the countryside. I did want to use this opportunity just to make one or two very brief points, if I may. And I'm not. I just want to clarify a point the officer made. Just to be clear, that at the end of the day, this is your decision. You're the decision maker here as the planning committee, and you can take a view that this is not an exceptional. This is not truly outstanding or innovative. Officers have given their view and put together a report setting out that in their view, and having taken advice from Design South East, that they believe that it does meet the tests of paragraph 79. But we certainly shouldn't be saying that just because Design South East say that they think it is, then that means that it is. There's an element of subjectivity, and members are entitled to take their own view on that. As I say, officers' view is that it is truly outstanding in this instance. I did take up the point that was made by a couple of members about could it be repeated. Well, I think if you started to take the same design and plonk it elsewhere, that's no longer an outstanding design in its own right. So I think that would preclude that from happening. Obviously, if there's an isolated location, someone could come up with another design that they believe is truly outstanding or innovative and reflects the high standards in architecture, and make an argument for that site. And each case would be determined on its own merits. I think you need to concentrate mainly on the architectural side here. Although it is fair, I mean, the officer did mention the removal of the barn. I think a word of caution, obviously, we don't want to see people coming along and saying, oh, I'm removing a barn so I can have a chopping great house. I mean, that's not the test. The test is, A, is it truly outstanding or innovative? Or B, would it significantly enhance its immediate setting and be sensitive to defining characteristics of the local area? And I think the point the officer was making is that needs to be factored in, because although the removal of the barn in itself, it does not qualify as the very special circumstances in combination with the others. And I think that was the point that Tracy Farbin was making. In combination with the other points on the planning balance, we believe that the very special circumstances, i.e. paragraph 79 compliance, has been met. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't want to say to you that we can't, that you have to go along with what officers say or Design South East say. I hope you will, but at the end of the day, there is very much an element of judgment in terms of what's truly outstanding or innovative. The final point I was going to make is, we did hear from the agent from Stratton Parker first, who was talking about whether this is isolated or not. Again, it's difficult because there's no specific definition. I know that he mentioned case law. To me, just as a planner, it looks like it qualifies in terms of being an isolated location, not within a hamlet or a village. But again, that's a judgment call for members. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. So once again, members, to remind you, it's up to us. And as my mother said, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I have two more speakers, George Wilson and John Gray. So, George, please.
Thank you, Chair. One thing that struck me was the large amount of letters in support of this in what they say is an isolated area. I wonder if Tracy, first of all, could tell me how many of these people are local and would be affected by the loss of Greenbelt. The second thing I was interested in, I believe in the Greenbelt. I think it looks to me as if this 79 is looking for a loophole, and we've skipped over the damage that will be done to the Greenbelt. So my mind at the moment is more on refusal, because we have actually given away quite a bit of the green belt over the years in Waverley, and I don't think we should be doing it. The design, well, what can I say about the design? I saw the initial pictures here, and I thought it looked like an upmarket Butlins, and I was expecting to see peddlers in the pond in front of it. So I don't know about design, obviously, but to me it's not anything wonderful. I think it probably is considered a good design, but in my mind, it's in the wrong place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, George. I mean, Butlins has been successful for very many years, of course, peddlers or no. Councillor Gray.
Sorry, I was asking Tracy about...
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry, George.
About the supporting letters.
Tracy.
It did seem a tremendous amount from a very small area.
Tracy, could you help Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, there were 43 letters of support from all locations. They do include some people that reside in Waverley, but the majority were outside of Waverley.
Okay, George.
Thank you, Tracy, as I suspected.
Thank you, Tracy. Yes, Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think a lot of the points I had have been raised and covered. I was a bit concerned about isolation, and you've sort of covered that. Also, whether Section 79 was relevant. I think the point I wanted to make is I get a lot of comfort out of Design South East. I've had quite a bit of experience of them, and they are fairly rigorous, and they have been known to say no. This is not just a group of people turning around and saying this is a truly outstanding building for the sake of it. I think the building, I mean, I'm not a great lover of modern building, but looking at it, it seems a really interesting and unusual building in there. And I wonder in 20 to 30 years whether it'll actually be pointed to as something that was quite outstanding, and that Waverley was quite far-reaching in their views for having approved it. I think there's a balance here, and my balance is probably to go with the officer's comments, very much encouraged by the rigour of Design South East, and I think that's quite an important point, plus the very large number of attempts facilities they have in there to improve the habitat, and I think they should be commended for that. So there's a lot gone into this, and I would be minded at the moment to go along with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. I've got three more speakers. I have Maxine Gale, Michael Goodridge, and Ruth Reid. I'll take them in that order. Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sort of a bit uncertain about the isolation of the dwelling. I can think of areas out near me where houses are well over 100 yards apart, have lots of fields behind them, and I can see that if we go for this, saying this is isolated, other people will think there's isolation in my field, well over 100 yards away from the nearest dwelling. We have no shops or public transport in some of our areas out near me, and that's one of the things that came up about being isolated. I think the shape and design is very interesting. I'm not sure it's outstanding, but it is very green, which obviously is something people are trying to work towards. So for me, the isolation is not quite there. And I think when Councillor Cossa said somebody could find a field and pop one of these in, I think he was meaning you could just find a field and build something that you thought was outstanding, which I think people could do if they saw this going through. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gale, but of course that is up to the members of this committee to make that. Councillor Goodridge.
Thank you, Chairman. We have to make, I suppose, two subjective decisions. One as to whether this site is isolated, and we've heard the officers' view, not just Tracy, but also the sort of planning team, who consider, with their experience, that it is isolated. and I'm sorry I couldn't do the site visit because I had a prior engagement, but I looked at the maps and the plans and taken a view. The second subjective decision is whether the design of the building meets the criteria for very special circumstances. And I have to say, rather in a similar vein as Councillor Gray, that I am swayed by the expertise of the panel that have taken a view on it. And it's not just the building, it's the way that it rests in the contours, how it relates to the woodland, how it relates to the meadow, how it relates to the lake, and so on as a whole package. So you couldn't just pick this up and plonk it down somewhere else. It's been designed to fit where it is to be located. And then as a bonus, but it is an aside, if you like, we lose a mega barn. And I'm also very conscious of the fact that the officer from the area of outstanding natural beauty does have positive views about this building. And weighing all those up together, I expect that I shall be following the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodridge. And last speaker, Councillor Reid. Ruth, please.
Thank you, Chair. I come from a background of farming. I'm a member of the Cranley South East Agricultural Society, and I was on their board. Now, I have lived in and next to farms, and usually they are a sort of going concern, and they have been. But as we heard from the Prince of Wales today, it's very sad, but a lot of them are, being sold off, which is, extremely sad. I think in this case, we've got the evidence and the expertise of an architect, and they are the experts on building and design. And I believe that whoever's considered this has considered this in a biodiversity sort of way. And although I didn't go on the site visit, I know the farm, I know neighbouring farms, I know what sort of land this farm is situated on. And really, it is, I agree, it's not particularly wonderful land to grow crops. The farms in this area now are, they've been done to death in a way. They're on the clay, which has to be fed. And the biggest farm near this, which is, I think it's Whitley Manor farm, they've diversified into feedstuffs and all sorts of other things. So I really feel that getting rid of a barn is not an issue, and that this is a very lovely building. I know it's been supported by the local people. It isn't a hamlet. This is the nearest place which is built up is Berkeley Green, and then Bramley if you want a few shops. So it is out in the countryside. So I'm going to be supporting it. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Members, I see no more speakers, so I think we're coming into decision time. Now that we're back in this chamber, you will be asked, as you know, to raise your hands at the appropriate point and with the appropriate decision, and Kimberly will do all the hard calculations.
Chairman, Zach's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Zach.
No, that's okay, Chairman, and I'll be very brief. It's just to sort of clarify, and because there was a bit of a comment about this being sort of getting around the system type thing, but I think it's just helpful to give a tiny bit of context as to how this has all come about. It's more than 20 years old. it's what's commonly called Gummer's Law. You may remember Lord John Selwyn Gummer, who wanted to create the stately homes of the future, because obviously, you know, we all value the stately homes that we go around, National Trust, Natural England, English heritage properties, and there was a concern that those aren't coming forward. So, you know, rightly or wrongly, there was this idea that if you had something that was absolutely, you know, outstanding and was creating a stately home of the future, then that's something that could be accepted, even though normal planning laws would try and resist that. And I think that's why this is still in, you know, the 2019 version of the National Planning Policy Framework. It's clear that the government feels that there is a role for these larger, grander, you know, truly outstanding properties to be built in the countryside. Obviously, you know, it has to meet the tests, and that's a matter for you to judge that. But I just thought it'd be useful to give a bit of context. You know, there is a clear guidance from central government that in certain circumstances, this is acceptable. That's all I really wanted to say, Chairman, so thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Zach. And I have one more speaker, Councillor Denis. Kevin, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was more just to make sure. I think Councillor Townsend raised the issue with the Flood Authority and they hadn't included it within the conditions. I think before we vote on it, we need to make sure we're voting for it plus that condition. Otherwise, that will get lost in the way.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. Tracy, so that means you're going to have to add an extra condition or informative.
Yep, so I think we've concluded that it will be one extra condition, which is the Flood Authority details of surface water drainage, and one informative to reinforce the zero carbon credentials of the dwelling. Is that correct?
Excuse me.
Councillor Townsend?
And also, Tracy, about the biodigester, you said you were going to check about the discharge and whether or not that would be potentially a condition or whether or not that would be an informative on that one.
Can I say it would have to be informative? Can I say, Chairman, sorry, I believe it would have to be an informative. You know, at the end of the day, there are licences in place, you know, for discharge of materials. Our role as the planning is just to make sure that there's suitable drainage and both potable water and foul drainage to the site. I think we would be straying into Environment Agency or building regulations territory if it was to be a condition. You know, so very happy for the informative though, Councillor Townsend.
I'm happy for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Townsend, you're looking for an informative on that. So that would mean, if I've got my sums correct, there are now 17 conditions and 8 informatives. Yeah, okay. Okay, so officer's recommendation before us, members, is that permission be granted subject to conditions 1 to 17 and informatives 1 to 7? 8. 8, thank you. I knew I had to write something down there. Members, may I see, would you raise your hands if you are in favour of this, of permission being granted?
Thank you.
And members, those against?
Thank you, Chair.
And do we have any abstentions? Good. Kimberly?
Thank you, Chairman. That's 10 for, 4 against and no abstentions. Therefore, it's carried.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, members. Right, moving on then to the second application before us with public speaking. This is WA 2020-2055, Chewsley Farm, Chewsley Lane, Godalming.
Chairman?
Councillor Baker.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, and especially that I have to say this publicly. I have a particular interest, of course, as member for Milford, but I find, because of the difficulties in the NHS at the moment, which I won't go into here, I need a comfort break. So I'm sorry, I do have to ask this in public, but at least it is out in public. Would that be in order?
Absolutely fine.
Because I know that I can't vote on this if I miss any of the comments.
Councillor Baker, that's fine. Do we
Thank you very much.
the meeting for... would 5 minutes be suitable? Thank you. Members, thank you. Fully refreshed, excellent. So we move on to WA 2020-2055, Chewsley Farm, Chewsley Lane, Godalming. The proposal in your papers, I'll read for you. Retention of 20 hectares of polytunnels throughout the year, 5.6 hectares heated by heat pumps drawing heat from the on-site reservoir, 14.4 hectares without heating, and more brackets located in particular fields identified as acceptable, and then on the farm, that is, 40 further hectares of polytunnels to be on site in fields identified as acceptable for polytunnels from the 1st of April until the 31st of October, with a retention of hoops on the further 40 hectares of polytunnels, removing plastic covers only between the 1st of November and 1st of April, as amended by plans received 14 May 2021. I think I got most of that. Our officer tonight who's going to take us through this is Alex Inglis. Alex, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. Okay, Kimberly, I can share my screen if that's easier, actually. Sorry. Okay, yes, thank you, Chairman. So before beginning my presentation, I would like to draw members' attention to the update sheet. Oops, draw members' attention to the update sheet, which reflects the 2 additional letters of representation that have been received since the publishing of the agenda. These include one from the National Trust. So the comments are summarised on this update sheet and are considered to have been addressed within the officer's report, with particular relevance to the response to third parties section. Additional comments have also been received from Hambledon Parish Council, reiterating their concerns about the impact on highway safety and traffic as a result of this proposal. And lastly, additional comments have also been received by the County Highway Authority, expanding on their comments that were previously submitted on the 28th of April. So these additional comments set out how the data contained within the transport statement submitted by Bellamy Roberts and that collected by the County Highway Authority themselves demonstrate that the current level of traffic movements are considered to be acceptable and is not proposed to be increased as a result of this proposal at peak times. So increased movements will result at either end of the current peaking season, which is acceptable in highway safety terms. Thank you. Let's move on to my presentation. So this slide shows the site's location plan. Chewsley Farm is an established soft fruit farm extending to some 190 hectares. It's divided north-south by Chewsley Lane and by Shadwell Copse, which runs southeast north-west, splitting the eastern section of the farm. The site is bound by Milford Station to the west, by Station Road and Station Lane to the south, and by Hambledon Road to the east. Chewsley Lane also runs along part of the northern boundary. It's also evident on this slide is Leafield Park to the northwest, and the primary cluster of farm buildings associated with Chewsley Farm is located within the northern portion of the site, and the reservoir can also be clearly seen here, located centrally. This slide shows an aerial view of the farm. It's clearly evident from this view are the existing polytunnels on site. This is taken from the council's GIS, which is a 2018 photo. The reservoir is also clearly seen on here, as well as the development of Leafield Park. Milford Golf Club can also be seen lying to the west of this photo. Now, this slide shows the existing permission at Chewsley Farm. The existing permission with regards to polytunnels at Chewsley Farm. So permission was granted under application reference WA/2007/1962 for up to 20 hectares of polytunnels to be erected on a rotational basis, with the hoops and the sheeting to be removed between November and January inclusive. So the fields currently consented are those shown on this plan in white. This slide shows the cross-section of the currently approved tunnels, and these measure 7.8 meters wide by 4 meters in height. I do appreciate it shows 3.9 meters on this diagram here. When you view the diagram at the bottom, it shows 4 meters, so that is what we are looking at, 4 meters. Now this slide shows the proposed coverage in winter, and so that is between November and March inclusive for a 5-month period. Shown on this slide, the blue outlines show the proposed locations of unheated polytunnels, with the orange outlines, those being fields 6B and C, and field 8, either side of the reservoir, proposed to be heated polytunnels. So maximum coverage during this time of 20 hectares of polytunnels are proposed. And this slide shows the autumn polytunnel coverage, spring to autumn, sorry, that being from April through to October. And again, the blue outlines indicate unheated tunnels and the orange showing heated tunnels. Now this area covers a total area of 66.2 hectares, with 40 hectares proposed in addition to the 20 hectares of the year-round tunnels shown on the previous slide. So the maximum coverage for this period of time from April through to October would therefore be up to 60 hectares, with the hoops remaining on the 40 hectares of tunnels to be retained and used again the following year. So it's important to note on this slide that fields 9A and B, those are just here, and fields 20A and 20B, just next to it here. These are the only fields proposed for tunnels that currently do not have consent for tunnels. Similarly, fields 5B, 5C here, and 16A, these are proposed to be free of polytunnels, and they currently have consent for tunnels. As shown in the officer's report at page 26, or on page 68 of the agenda pack, fields 2, 3A and 3B, those on the western section here, are shown as being a slightly different shape on the proposed plans when compared to the existing permission. This is considered to reflect the shape of the fields as they are today, as they are farmed today, and the assessments have been made on the basis of the fields as shown on these proposed plans. Similarly, some of the fields centrally are shown as a different shape simply because the reservoir was not there in 2007. And this slide shows the sections of the proposed polytunnels. They are to be almost identical to those on site. However, due to advancements in the technology of polytunnels since 2007, they are going to be 40 centimeters wider at 8.2 meters, again with a 4-meter height. There's a slight kind of pitch roof form on them as well, which again is just to sort of stop collection of snow and ice on the top of polytunnels. And this shows the buffer zone context plan, and indicated on this slide is the locations at which polytunnels will not be erected. So all the fields on this slide with the green hatching form the buffer zone, and it's these areas that are proposed to remain free of polytunnels. This plan is listed as an approved plan, but a condition is also recommended to ensure that this is not contravened and that these fields remain free of polytunnels. The many coloured lines on this plan indicate varying minimum distances from the edge of the fields from the edge of the polytunneled area to the edge of the fields. So greater distances are proposed where fields abut, say, significant vegetative features that form key landscape features. So those are shown in the blue lines, particularly around Shadwell Copse here. So those indicate a minimum of 20-metre separation. Similarly, with public rights of way, as shown in the yellow lines, there's a minimum 15-metre separation from polytunnels to the edge of those fields. And the other fields, which are shown in orange outlines, that's a minimum of 6-metre separation from the tunnels to the edge of the field. And similarly, farm tracks, which are shown in purple, that's a minimum of 4-metre separation from polytunnels to the edge of the fields. And this shows the landscape master plan for the site. And this has evolved over the sort of course of the proposal, following discussions, particularly with Natural England. And whilst indicative at this stage, the plan will form the basis of the works to enhance the landscape that will be secured through the Landscape Ecological Management Plan, the LEMP, that is to be submitted and agreed. Now, that is to be submitted and agreed in consultation with the Surrey Wildlife Trust and Natural England. And that is to be submitted, secured through condition to be submitted within 2 months of any permission granted. Would just draw members' attention to a few particular points of note on this plan, with particular landscape enhancements. So there are rows of specimen native trees to be planted in these sort of green lines with the sort of green circles along them between fields. These are kind of going to sort of split up and sort of divide the fields more visually. There's also additional native tree copse planting here along, kind of all the way along Shadwell Copse's sort of central part here, as shown by these small green dots. There's also additional wildflower meadows in the kind of small multicolored dots between fields on field boundaries, along some of the tree planting between fields as well, and at this section to the north of the farm. And these dark green lines, lastly here, either side of Chewsley Lane and at the southern boundary of the site here, are proposing additional kind of gapping up with hedgerows and field boundaries. The orange triangles, also are invertebrate hotels, which are going to be brought into the site. So these landscape enhancement measures are designed to mitigate and break up visual impacts of the proposed tunnels, as well as to bring quite significant biodiversity benefits in, which in turn would aid productivity on the site. So it's kind of a mutual benefit here for biodiversity and for the applicant, because the increased biodiversity, increased insects, increased pollination will result in additional yield. So the matters for consideration this evening for members are as follows. They are the impact on the green belt, on heritage assets, the design and impact on visual amenity and landscape character, the impact on residential amenity and the economic justification, impact on highway safety, and the impact on biodiversity. Thank you, Chairman.
For guest speakers with us tonight, we have Mr. George Fairweather and Mr. Harry Hall, and we have Councillor Clive Bond from Busbridge Parish, and our own ward councillor, Councillor Richard Seaborn. I'll take these speakers in that order and remind speakers that they have 4 minutes to do their presentation. So, Mr. Fairweather.
Good evening. I speak on behalf of many who oppose this application. Equivalent to 90 football pitches, it's one of the largest in Waverley's history, triple that currently allowed, massively increasing the density of ugly white plastic polytunnels with minimal scope for field rotation. It's got tunnels all year round and no requirement to remove steel hoops, these being most visible in the winter, all in a protected area with heritage assets. It requires more HGVs on a road signposted as being unsuitable and does nothing to address the current water runoff, which causes terrible flooding, potholes and black ice. The current permissions are based on the Government Planning Inspector's report and legal agreement, which followed Waverley's multiple enforcement actions in the High Court back in 2005. The key lesson since then is that planning conditions which are difficult and are costly to enforce are simply meaningless. The sheer scale and nature of today's proposals go far beyond the maximum the inspector deemed acceptable and are contrary to key planning policies. Why then, I ask, does your planning department consider it unnecessary to commission your own independent landscape impact assessment? Overturning an inspector's report without such an assessment cannot be right, particularly as the extent to which the tunnels will be seen from AOBs is hotly disputed. I trust you have read the National Trust's concerns. The application itself kept changing, contradictory, contains multiple errors, is far from being transparent, and is still missing essential information. This is compounded by unverified statements, many repeated in your officer's report. Which actual fields are all the permanent tunnels to be sited in? Surely this must be known before an application can be approved. But possibly, can the plotting of fields evolve? Field boundaries don't magically expand into a buffer zone on their own accord. Why, I ask, does the transport statement consider only peak traffic, not overall, given the extended season when daylight hours are shorter and station lane regularly floods? Why does it not address known safety issues, such as HGVs mounting the pavement paths? Why were the missing environmental and economic plans only submitted after the original due date for comment? This is unacceptable, particularly as the only conceivable reason why planning could be given is economic. In any case, the economic justification is extremely weak. It's long and unverifiable words and short on financial numbers. We need a Hull Hunter's business pressures, but why does it not disclose how profitable it is? Where are the figures to justify stopping the removal of hoops? Historic records show Hull Hunter to be hugely profitable, with unusually high margins for a food production business, as demonstrated by the recent sale of 2/3 of their business for a reported £53 million. This might explain why it now operates using a controversial LLP structure. Hull Hunter appears well able to thrive with current planning, but is yet again seeking to aggressively pursue higher profits to the detriment of our community. The rationale for considering planning can therefore only be incremental benefit to our local economy.
Mr. Fairweather, would you wind up, please?
Sadly, your officer's report fails to state this. Doing the simple maths on incremental farm expenditure, it's £173 a week. The benefits, from employment at max are only £560 a week using the same margin assumption. So not surprisingly, no local business has written to support this application. There's clearly no material benefit from approving such a massive expansion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fairweather. And now move to Mr. Hall, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, thank you. That's fine.
So I'm the owner of Chewsley Farm. I've owned Chewsley Farm since 2002, and I think the landscape and the farm has changed irrevocably since that stage. We have worked closely with the officers, the councillors, landscape advisor, and Natural England to resolve the outstanding concerns, and are delighted that Natural England have removed their holding objection and that your officers are recommending the application for approval. Since the referral of the application at the April committee meeting, the scheme has been amended to include additional landscaping and biodiversity enhancements, including additional hedgerows, tree plantings and wildflower margins, giving a significant biodiversity net gain. In addition, we have removed tunnels from more sensitive higher ground, addressing the concerns over the impact of views from the AONB. Field T22 has also been included within the tunnel-free buffer area. At Chewsley, we grow 3,000 tonnes of berries every year. We represent 2% of the UK annual berry production. We have a turnover of 14 million and employ 130 full-time staff, reaching 500 in the season. We spend £3 million with suppliers, 10% of which is spent locally, and we spend £7 million on staff wages, most of whom live on site. The proposal will enable us to employ our staff for longer in the season. Our business needs to remain competitive, and to do that, we have to offer our customers what, If the business cannot offer what our customers want, our customers will simply look to other suppliers to fulfill their requirements. Customers require ever-increasing volumes of berries available for more of the season at affordable prices. Season by season, the quality standards have gone up, whilst prices have largely remained flat. The proposal will enable the business to grow berries earlier and later in the year. increase the yields by about 15%, giving the farm a sustainable future. Chewsley Farm is net carbon negative, with 108 tonnes of carbon removed from the atmosphere annually. With every tonne of berries, 32 kilograms of net carbon is removed. By producing more berries earlier and later in the season, this would reduce the need for importations of overseas berries. Overall, we believe that the proposal provides a genuine biodiversity enhancement and has tangible benefits for the local economy and community, which, whilst better enabling the farm to have a sustainable future. We ask the committee to support the recommendation to approve.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hall. Now I call on Councillor Clive Bond from Busbridge Parish Council. Clive. Sorry, Clive, you're muted. Yeah, okay.
Busbridge Parish Council cannot ignore the many letters of objection submitted by our residents. These are genuine concerns and are largely driven by the fact that Chewsley Farm has regularly broken the conditions set out in previous planning permissions. Many of these concerns, and especially the landscape impacts, will have been covered by other speakers already, so I'm going to concentrate mainly on the traffic issues. But I would like to say as well that we do support the business needs as outlined by Harry just now, and the changes he has made during the application process in terms of landscape and biodiversity. So going back to transport, Waverley Planners and Surrey Highways appear to have accepted the submitted transport statements, which suggests that there will be no increase in peak HGV traffic movements. This despite a declared 15% increase in fruit yield, and whilst the year-round retention of 20 hectares of polytunnels will extend the growing season and increase yield in the shoulder months, early and late season, the increase from 20 to 60 hectares during the peak growing season will surely increase yield across the whole of this period too. Therefore, we consider a zero increase in peak daily movement to be an impossibility. There is no mention in the transport statement to the farm's new farming operation at Eashing Farm either. Whilst we accept that this planning application is about Chewsley Farm, the transfer of a large quantity of blueberry plants to Eashing will allow more strawberry production at Chewsley, and the movement of the additional harvested fruits from Eashing to Chewsley Farm for packing and distributing will result in increased traffic along Chewsley Lane, Station Lane and beyond. And yet the transport statement is based on historic figures from before the Eashing operation commenced and only includes HGV lorries. Over the winter we saw multiple daily tractor and trailer movements between the two farms. We therefore request a revised traffic statement that reflects the true traffic impact that the current proposals will have on our local roads. We do not understand how any decisions can be made based on traffic data that is fundamentally flawed. The last traffic survey conducted by Surrey Highways was in 2016. Therefore, the baseline data is now 5 years out of date. We note that the planning conditions proposed by Waverley Borough Council protect birds, bats, badgers, great-crested newts, etc. Whilst we accept the importance of these creatures, we also note that there is no condition that protects our children whilst travelling to school or commuters walking to and from Milford Station along the narrow footpath from farm-generated traffic that frequently has to mount the footpath along Station Lane in order to pass oncoming vehicles. We would suggest that there should be no HGV traffic movements from Chewsley Farm at school start and end times in an effort to protect our children and other pedestrians. There are currently no constraints whatsoever on the timing of vehicle movements, which means that at peak times some residents are woken at 5 AM by the heavy lorries shaking their homes. Could we please ask that vehicle movements are restricted to more acceptable hours, say after 6 AM? We further request that Waverley Borough Council impose a condition that prevents a creeping growth of traffic movements and that the agreed traffic levels are regularly monitored. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. And now, Councillor Seaborn. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. I called in this application in my capacity as one of the ward members for Bramley, Busbridge and Hascombe. The potential impacts of the proposed development will affect adjacent wards and indeed reach much further, which is in part why I considered it appropriate to ask for determination by committee. Can I start by thanking Alex for the clear and extensive report for such a large application? In my mind, there are two significant positive aspects for the application to consider, against which I worry about a couple of aspects of concern. As Mr. Hall's already said, the economic assessment tells us that Tuesley Farm is now growing around 2% of the national crop of berries each year and providing a large number of both full-time and seasonal jobs. This is a significant economic benefit to the parish, the borough and the county. The extended growing season, if approved, will increase this benefit further. A longer growing season will produce additional berries that will replace fruit with a much higher carbon footprint imported from the continent. So this has to be a good thing in light of Waverley's carbon reduction aspirations. Offset against these major positives are the issues of impact on the landscape and the additional HGV movements that Mr. Bond has just adequately described. So you're looking at a large site which sits just outside the AONB and is viewable from the AONB. The site lies within both the Greenbelt and the AGLV. There have been around 60 representations made by residents with objections outweighing support by about 6 to 1. And representations have also been submitted by Busbridge, Hambledon and Whitley parish councils, none of which outright objected, but all three have raised concerns about the additional vehicular movements and the question of the visual impact. The applicant's landscape assessment has been reviewed independently on behalf of Waverley, with the conclusion that the methodology was sound and that the landscape outcomes, as assessed, are considered to be acceptable. But this view has been countered by a landscape assessment by Chris Burnett Associates, commissioned by local residents. And the findings of that study are at odds with the applicant's study. So I hope members will have read the alternative perspectives and will use them to balance their conclusions. The question of traffic, while vexed, is hard to use against the application. Neighbours argue that the existing impact is unacceptable, and in my view, users of Station Lane have grounds to be unhappy at the use of this narrow but relatively busy road by HGVs. However, this usage is established, and the application before you sets out that there will be no increase in intensity of HGV usage, though HGVs will use the surrounding roads for more months of the year. Providing the claimed number of HGV trips is not exceeded, I struggle to see that the extension of the HGV season provides grounds for refusal, although I hope you will consider supporting yesterday's suggestion from the Highways Authority for a condition requiring a traffic management plan. A final point that in my view has not been adequately addressed is flagged in a number of objections. Rainwater runoff causing flooding on Station Lane. Neither the officer report nor the flood risk assessment specifically address this issue. I don't know if the Hall Hunter application would in any way make this problem worse, but you may want to consider the absence of adequate consideration of this issue in your deliberations. So to conclude, if I were voting, I think I would reluctantly support the officer's recommendation to approve because of the economic benefits to Waverley and Surrey, and because the farm will produce berries that get to market with a lower carbon footprint than imported berries. But the impact on residents through a very significant modification of the landscape does need to be considered very seriously. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Excellent. So no more public speakers. As you know from your papers, the officer's recommendation is that permission be granted subject to conditions 1 to 16 and informatives 1 to 8. Do I have any speakers? Councillor Darcy.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've actually written about 10 points, but I don't know if I'll get through them all. The first thing I'd like to say, this is a huge increase. There's going to be 3 times as much area covered in plastic, and that's an area, and there'll be an area equal to what is currently the maximum allowed that will be permanent or in place all year round, including in the winter. So I would ask, is this proportionate as an increase? Is it reasonable? And is it fair to the rest of the community? And also, how does it tie in with the decision that was made in 2005 about 40 hectares being too much? So one argument seems to be the view from Gibbet Hill and Mare Hill is already spoiled. This seems to be the argument that Hunter Hall are making by the existing polytunnels. And therefore, what's wrong with spoiling it a little bit more, or a big bit more? My view on that is that previously no tunnels would have been present during the winter, which is the time when there's the minimum amount of foliage to screen them. So this is a different situation. Because what started as empty fields in winter at first became fields with metal legs in, and now will become fields with complete polytunnels. So these are concerns I have, and I'm debating it still as to what I think, because the argument seems to be that these are all accepted, these are the downsides. The positive seems to be that the economic argument, but we haven't been given a validated independent analysis of this economic argument. We've only got the word of the applicant. Now, I don't doubt that the applicants are entirely honest, but let's be honest ourselves, if you're not going to give necessarily all the picture. So I think to use that as to overturn the detriment, we really could do with a stronger, validated, independent look at what the economic benefits are, because ultimately that's what this depends on. My concern also is with the traffic, and I do agree that we should be an updated review of traffic. I think that's something we should put down. We should make it a condition, possibly, that, if it's possible, that the lorries can't travel at certain times, because they do cause a lot of problems for people. I'm pleased that Natural England will be reviewing the LEMP. I'm disappointed that, as usual, we will never get to see the LEMP or have any say in it, but hey. But I'd like to know how they're going to monitor it. So, for example, we're going to have these separation distances varying all over the site between the distance from the tunnel to the features. But who's going to monitor that? You know, what evidence, what guarantee have we got that's actually going to happen? So that's my concern. I'm slightly concerned about heritage assets. I think they got kind of booted out of the way. We were told, oh, well, the economic benefit outrides any heritage asset negative impact. And I think, again, that all depends on how good the economic justifications are. So what I would like, I think, is for the public, local communities to have more say, or perhaps some means of communication with Hunter Hall, so that all these sort of issues can be ironed out continually, rather than waiting until every time they put in an application. And then we try and pile in a load of conditions to deal with the mess that was created earlier. So could we please, if it's possible, establish a condition or a recommendation that a liaison committee is set up between the parish councils and Hunter Hall that has teeth? I won't say any more because I've probably taken up too much time, so thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Darcy. Never too much time. Alex, would you be able to respond to some of those points to help?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm going to run through things, although I'm not sure there are any kind of direct questions there. If you would like me to just kind of briefly provide a comment, unless Councillor Darcy would like to kind of frame it in any direct questions, but otherwise happy to just run over a few things.
Have you a specific question then?
I think my main question would be, is there, what is the economic justification, and have we validated it independently? I mean, I know the answer is no, but I'd just like that to be on the record.
Okay, and of course, these decisions are also up to ourselves. I have a further speaker, Councillor Cotter.
Sorry, Chairman, if I may, I can just quickly answer that question of Councillor Darcy's, if you like.
Yes, please.
Sure. So yes, as you kind of alluded to there, Councillor Darcy, the economic statement that has been provided, as I think I included in the officer report, has not been independently verified or audited. What I would say to kind of potentially add some weight to that is that the council's economic development team do support the application and did quote similar figures to me when kind of providing a consultation response. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have Councillor Cotter now, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Only a few points, really. The first one is I did want to ask a question as to this issue about the allegation that the runoff is causing flooding locally. I have to say, because both my children or my grandchildren live quite close and in the Milford area, not in any declarable way, I have to say, but I drive Station Lane and local roads quite regularly, and I have to say that the flooding is quite a regular and significant problem in the area. Now, I don't know what causes that. I'm no expert, but if you know, have we investigated how far this is something to do with runoff, or is it something else? But if it is it something we should have addressed? I think that's my first question. My second one is about the traffic management. It does seem to me, just from observation subjectively, that there has been quite a significant increase over a period in the movement of HGV vehicles. But I take the point that's been made. It's an established use, and the best assessment that we're being given is that that's not going to increase significantly. So I'm not sure there's much to do about that. I tend to agree with what Councillor Darcy said as well about heritage assets. I understand that at the end of the day, the planning officer has to make an overall judgment, and a lot of people are saying, and I probably share, that the economic benefit probably weighs more significantly in the balance. But I do feel, to some extent, although we had a long list of what they were and so on, that I'm not convinced overall that we've given sufficient weight to that, but there's going to be an overall judgment as well. I accept that. Absolutely love the idea as well from Councillor Darcy about some local forum, but I doubt it's something we can impose as a planning condition. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. So you have two questions, one about flooding and one about HGV movements.
Yes, the specific question there really is the one I think that the Councillor Seaborn raised as well, about the proposal for a traffic management plan. Can we add this as a condition? I think, you know, some of the concerns are probably quite legitimate about the timing of movement and things like that.
Okay. Alex, can you comment on that, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'll just touch on the flooding and the runoff point. I appreciate that I've read lots of comments about this as well. The lead local flood authority were consulted on this application. They're actually, I think, the first people to get back to me after we sent out these consultations to say that whilst this proposal, of course, is significant, the impact of it is not considered to result in any additional flood risk or runoff. In fact, that the on-site drainage scheme I understand is very good, and I think is very supported by the lead local flood authority, particularly I think centred around the reservoir. So I think it would be unwise if we were to go down any kind of refusal on flood risk grounds. Certainly. Moving on to the second point about traffic management. Again, the data that we've got before us, which is supplied by an external consultant on behalf of the applicant, and then also by the County Highways Authority, is that the current level of movements from HGVs and traffic associated with the site is acceptable. We have had meetings numerous times with the County Highways Authority as to the acceptability of any additional conditions, and it's always come back to the fact that the current situation is considered to be acceptable, and therefore any additional restriction on that would be unreasonable. And if we're going to be imposing conditions, we do have to be mindful of the fact that they've got to meet the tests of reasonableness and enforceability, and every time we've kind of discussed this, it's come back to the point that we don't believe that with the advice of the County Highways Authority, who are the experts here, that that it would be unreasonable for us to impose any restrictive conditions, particularly around school times. It's, that kind of movement is very onerous and may not be reasonable. So I would just like to say that to members. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, actually, there was one last point that I was going to make, which I think Councillor Costa and Councillor Darcy both raised, if I may, about the potential for ongoing kind of liaison. We have had previous discussions about this, and I understand that whether it's formal or informal in terms of the conditions, I understand that there is kind of plans to have some kind of liaison with parish councils, with officers. I don't know if Zach may want to add something on that, but we have discussed this, and I think it's something that we're quite keen to pursue, because I think across members and officers we think that it would be beneficial. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Alex. Zach, if you're there, would you be able to comment?
I don't think I've got anything to add to what Alex already said, to be fair.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Okay, I have 4 more speakers. I have Councillor Denis, Councillor Gale, Councillor Goodridge and Councillor Baker, and I'll take them in that order. Yeah, Liz, right, and Councillor Townsend. Am I? Yes. Just those, right. Okay, so Councillor Denis.
Thank you, Chair. This is a really interesting one, because I think most people accept the economic benefits, but I do have concerns for the residents. I'm going through the report, page 2, which is on page 44, 3rd paragraph. It talks about subject to successful implementation of landscape management works. Well, I think history has shown at that location that hasn't worked, and it still isn't working. It's really interesting when you look at the things people say in their letters. I think one is really telling, and that's under landscape on page 14 of the 47. And it says it will be white, clear plastic showing stand out in the landscape. I think that's absolutely relevant in this case. I did chuckle when I looked at the highways and the 9 letters. So that's on page 58, which is page 16 of 47. It says HGVs are driven carefully and slowly. I'm yet to really see that. Having driven in this area quite a bit, when you come across an HGV, if I see one that's careful and slow, I will let everybody know. My biggest concern is the impact on heritage assets, which seems to have been scooted over quite a lot. And it says it's about preserving the buildings and its settings and features of special architectural or historic interest which it possesses. And I really can't see how this application does that in any way, shape or form. Now, I did receive an email, and if I get the pronunciation wrong, from a Deborah Cavalcanti. I'm sure everybody else got that. Which she basically is complaining that it talks about her premises, but nobody's actually visited or nobody has actually looked at the impact on her premises. So I suppose my first question to Alex, there's 2 pages of heritage assets, which are pages 62, 63, and I think probably going into page 64, whether each one of these assets has been visited and the impact has been considered. Because I can't actually see from this that it has been. I think there's a description of each premise, which is probably from the website. Have we actually visited, so we really do know what the impact on those heritage assets? Because then when you go on to page 65, it talks about primary contributor is the setting of the heritage assets, is the rural and agricultural origin. And then it says it has a degree of impact. I couldn't work out what degree actually meant. And then it goes into there's going to be limited, less than substantial harm. Well, that is quite a subjective view, and I'm sure my colleagues here will have a consideration what this huge increase will actually mean. Going on a few pages, page 69 of our complete pack, the AONB advisor it says it considered the increased coverage would spoil the setting of the AONB, which is contradiction to the Surrey Hills Management Plan, etc., etc., etc. And I never really was convinced that this point has been addressed. And even a tree and landscape officer says these will appear as blots on the landscape which must be weighed into the planning balance. I thought that was a really telling sentence, blots on the landscape. Looking at then a third-party landscape assessments, I suppose it's like a solicitor or any other specialist. They will always contradict each other, and that's why they're in the business. But it talks about no close photos of the polytunnels have been offered, no assessment of the proposed residential properties have been undertaken. Again, I think it would have been helpful to have had that. I do hear what Alex has said about the enforceability, or whether it's acceptable to have a condition that says not to be used during the school hours. I actually have seen conditions in the past with that actually on. So again, my subjective view is I would recommend that we do that. And if we require a proposal for that, I'm sure my colleagues can then give their views. I am concerned about this. I'm concerned on the damage for the area, on the heritage assets. I have to accept what Surrey Highways have said. I wonder whether they physically have got out. I accept there's thousands of applications they get asked on, but I think some do require a personal visit to make sure what they say is actually appropriate. So I have concerns, but I look forward to my colleagues' recommendations and their views. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Do you want to ask Alex right now a specific question, or come back to it later?
I think Alex might want to sort of group them together. I think as long as he comes back, because I think some of my colleagues may have similar questions, and I think it'll be quicker to group them together. Thank you.
Okay. So next speaker, Councillor Gale. Maxine.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, the economic benefits of the farm are definitely noted, and the company are supportive of local communities. However, the local residents do contact us. One of the problems being historical problems with enforcement, but that's not relevant in determining this application. Although I would say that if we're going to set anything down, we should be able to manage them and actually follow them up in a timely and robust manner. Although the application is not actually in my ward, residents have contacted me because transport movements are in our ward, and they are very relevant to Milford, and this was noted by Whitley Parish Council as well. The main route to and from the A3 are via the old Portsmouth Road, past a residential area, the post office, Village Hall, Station Lane passes very closely by the dwellings that front Springwood, and a number of cottages that are dotted along the route from Church Road to Chewsley Lane. If the Milford Golf Course site is built, they will pass even more homes and over traffic calming measures, which can make them even noisier. I'm not sure it slows them down. It's with this in mind that I've noted Highways have commented that the extended growing season and polytunnel coverage does not increase the number of daily vehicle movements, so they have no objection. Residents have said they disagree with this. It will increase the number of months the residents have to listen to the thunder of HGVs passing their bedrooms through the night. The farm states that its own vehicle movements are restricted to the hours between 5 a.m. and 11 p.m, but the arrival of vehicles from other agencies, companies, suppliers or overseas is something they can't do anything about. Residents are currently complaining about noise through the night, and this is going to be for a much longer time through the year. We're all actually aware that supermarkets and commercial businesses have restricted hours for deliveries. This was become widely spoken about during the early days of the pandemic, when the restrictions were going to be removed temporarily to facilitate the less congestion on the roads. I'd like to ask, therefore, if we could consider whether it would be possible to include a condition in the application restricting the movement of HGVs to and from the farm between the hours of 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. I don't think that's unreasonable when you see how close the bedrooms are. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure you'll listen closely to all the other discussions going on. Councillor Goodridge.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I say how useful the site visit we had many months ago now, before trees were in leaf, from memory. And I can remember the site visit I had in 2007, before the main permission was granted. And the one thing that I noticed was the increase in the vegetation that had grown up in the intervening 14 years of trees that weren't there 14 years ago, which are now providing some sort of screening in accordance, no doubt, with the conditions that were imposed back in 2007. I have to say I'm impressed by the biodiversity that the applicant exercises, and I found that quite fascinating when it was explained exactly what they're doing to ensure the encouragement of the correct insects and everything else, to ensure that in natural way the non-friendly insects that might eat the fruit are discouraged from being around. Can I say on flooding, having lived in this area all my life and lived in Godalming for the majority of my life, I've gone down Tuesley Lane over the decades, and at the bottom of Tuesley Lane it is always, particularly in the winter, had water problems across the road. I mean, that has been there for decades. I haven't noticed, although I still go quite frequently down that road. I haven't noticed it any worse. So I think any suggestion, and I don't think there's any evidence that any suggestion that the flooding on Tuesley Lane in the dip is worse as a result of the activities on Tuesley Farm, I don't think there is the evidence. I think we've got to look at this thing in context. We've got to look at it in context of the permissions that have already been granted, and a lot of the objectors are talking about, you know, the eyesore of polytunnels. Well, there is already permission for a certain number of polytunnels, and the vast majority of the increase in the permanents are right in the middle of the site, a long way from the heritage buildings. And the site visit was very good at looking at the heritage buildings and how far away they are from the polytunnels that are proposed. Finally, on transport, I have to say that with the Surrey County Council saying that they have no objections, we are on a very weak grounds for starting to impose conditions on transport or changing the situation. We have no evidence, and I think if we start putting up objections based upon transport, we are opening ourselves up to some difficulty if those conditions were appealed against. So I think I would be very wary of that. A good idea, of course, to have good communication between the parishes and the applicant, and Zach has mentioned that this is something that's being suggested, and I support that. But putting any conditions on transport, I think, would be a dangerous route to follow. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Your experience is always noted. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I note that basically this is another application where officers have considered on balance what their conclusions are. That's what I'm going to do. And as member for Milford, I'm going to look at the impact on Milford, but as Waverley member, I'm also going to look at the impact on the wider area. And I think I will start with that because I'm going to address the matter of impact on the landscape. And the reason why I'm doing that, actually, is because this item was deferred from April, which is not in considerable time, on the grounds of clarification required on Natural England's comment, which was objection. And miraculously, Natural England have now changed their objection because mitigation measures have been proposed. So, on landscape, Natural England and the AONB advisor had regard to long-distance views from the AONB, and they particularly looked at the A3 going northwards. I would say that it was also appropriate, and this has not been done, to look at medium distance views, and I'm thinking from the Greensand Ridge to the south, Brook Road being an example, with the apartment buildings which actually look north. I do know that from those apartment buildings you can actually see Secret's greenhouse, which was once mistaken by a local planning inspector for a sheet of water. Secret's glass house is very much smaller in area than the proposal that we have here for all those hectares, and 20 hectares of them to be permanently covered by polytunnels. You don't just, Greensand Ridge extends for quite a long way. So I would actually suggest that there are a lot of views where the Greensand Way is open for people to see what is proposed if it actually happens. I don't think that the mitigation measures are actually having regard to this. It is not the same as looking from the A3. And in fact, the angle of vision vertically is not the same as looking from further back. So I don't think that these mitigation measures, which involved trees and planting, are actually going to be as effective as we might think. And the officer has, as Councillor Dean has pointed out, referred to the polytunnels as blots on the landscape. I'm also going to say that the original consent for 20, which covered 20 hectares, was limited for a reason, and that was because of the landscape impact. And I want to know what's changed. And I think that the scale of what is proposed is quite simply beyond mitigation. People have also picked up here, other councillors, on heritage assets. I'm concerned because I was amazed at how many there are in a very small area, relatively speaking. And I just got the impression that the consideration of the impact on these assets had been reduced to a desktop exercise. So I would support Councillor Dinas in what he has asked for, which is confirmation that visits were made to these very important buildings, which you cannot ignore. They're listed grade 2. I also would like to draw members' attention to the fact that when you're considering listed buildings, you have to look at the setting. It isn't just their immediate surroundings, it is the whole setting. And you may say that the polytunnels are going to be concentrated in the centre of Hall Hunter's landholding, but I still think that they're not so far away that they won't impact on the heritage, the setting of the heritage buildings. I now come to highways. We already have difficulties with heavy goods vehicles, commercial vehicles, on Station Lane in Milford. And I have to say, outraged when I saw in this report a statement: as part of Milford Golf Course development, works will be carried out to widen footways on Station Lane, and speed calming measures will be implemented, which will provide a safer pedestrian route in the surrounding area. That has not yet been decided, and we don't know when it will be decided, because apart from the planning consent, which is not there at the moment, there is also an enforceable covenant on the land. So we can't rely, and I'm amazed that this report implies it, we cannot rely on the improvements to Station Lane coming about any time soon, if ever. And of course, county will not want to have to foot the bill if the Milford Golf Course application doesn't go ahead. So I'm not terribly impressed by what county have to say about this application.
Councillor Baker, may I just ask you to wind up, please?
Yes, certainly.
We have
and
one
I'm
more
sorry
speaker.
to be slow, but there have been problems with traffic, with vehicles accessing Hall Hunter Partnerships premises who are not their lorries. And recently, the road was blocked in Hambledon on 2 different occasions because a heavy goods vehicle had gone down Lane End and Malthouse Lane trying to access Hall Hunter. I think if you have more development on the Hall Hunter site, you will get these lorries who are not Harry Hall's lorries anyway, and therefore those movements cannot be controlled. And I think that's an argument against what's proposed. I'd also like to say very quickly that the economic statement has had no independent verification. The Waverley Economic Development Team are not agricultural specialists, and we should have had agricultural specialists to verify or otherwise this economic statement. So I don't see how we can actually grant consent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And lastly, Councillor Townsend, please.
Thank you.
Do I have any other speakers, by the way? Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened with great interest to my colleagues, and there's a few things that I would like some clarification on. First of all, I'm very much welcome the fact that Alex said that there is proposal to have the liaison group, and whether or not that could be an informative, so it could sort of tie it up a little bit more, because it does seem that there does need to be an improvement in, you know, in the relations between the local community and also Hall Hunter. One other thing, and Alex, you'll be able to answer this, was that with the permanent polytunnels, I just want some reassurance that doesn't change the status of the land at all, the permanence of the polytunnels, okay, Catherine's shaking her head for me. Thank you very much. I was just thinking about that whilst I was sitting here. I was quite interested about the traffic data and also all of the major concerns around traffic. And I do wonder whether or not we could perhaps have a traffic management plan condition within the application. I just think that would put lots of people's minds at rest, and it would also focus, I think, Hall Hunter's mind as well on managing perhaps the traffic there a little better for the community. That was my notes, I think. Yes, I understand about the water runoff and everything, but I have looked through the application, and as has been said, I think there is no objection by either Surrey County Council or the lead local flood authority as the lead local flood authority. So unfortunately, I don't think there's anything that we can do on that basis. But interested to know about the liaison group and also the traffic management. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Alex, can you address those 2 points, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I will respond to those 2 comments. I've got quite a list of other points that I might go through as well, just from the various speakers. Councillor Townsend, just to kind of go over those 2 points, I think Catherine has just covered off that question about the permanence of the tunnels. It's still going to remain as agricultural land, and there's no risk of the land changing its designation, that kind of thing. The liaison group, yep, absolutely, that can be put on as an informative. I think that would be good. Traffic data and the condition for traffic management, as I kind of touched on previously, based on the data that we have got before us and the comments that we've had from the County Highway Authority, I would suggest that it's probably not reasonable to put on that kind of condition, but that of course is at the gift of members if they deem it to be necessary. Just going to go back over a couple of other bits, if that's okay, Chairman. Councillor Dinas touched on the enforceability of landscape works historically. I think it may have been covered that we must focus ourselves on the application before us here, and that any kind of alleged or confirmed failure to undertake any other historic landscape works shouldn't be part of the consideration here. There's been a few comments on the heritage impact. I personally have not visited all the heritage sites that are listed in my report. As with all of our applications where heritage is a factor, we do rely on the comment from our historic buildings team, who are specialists in that, same as we would with other kind of specialist areas. And the comments there are quite prescriptive in how they need to be applied in the MPPF, and that is that the level of harm must be identified, and that is quite. I appreciate that the words of limited, less than substantial harm may not sound conclusive, but that is a level of harm that was identified in the MPPF, and that is what has been identified by the historic buildings officer in the rounds with regard to these heritage assets. And the test then is to weigh those against the public benefits of the scheme. That is the test that we must go through, and that is one that has been gone through. And overall, it has been concluded that those public benefits do outweigh the limited, less than substantial additional harm. Noted that, of course, there is an established farming enterprise at Chewsley with polytunnels, albeit not to the scale and permanence that is being proposed. Right, let's just see any other comments that I've got. In terms of the LVIA and the landscape assessments, individual residential assessments were not undertaken, but the landscape visual assessment submitted by Huskisson Brown Associates, which is on behalf of the applicant, that was the viewpoints that were considered were agreed with the council's appointed landscape expert. That they went round the site to all the viewpoints, etc., and agreed on suitable points to visit that would give a holistic view and a suitable overarching assessment of the landscape impact. And then the conclusions of that landscape assessment were that it was a suitable landscape assessment that produced conditions that we can rely on. Some of the other points we've got. There was mention from Councillor Gale about a potential condition to restrict HGVs from 6 AM to 11 PM. Again, I think if we're going to get into the realms of transport restrictions and conditions, it's of course at the gift of members to decide if that is necessary. I'm sure if that is the case, then something more maybe holistic will be agreed upon, and something can be maybe discussed if that is deemed necessary. Councillor Baker raised in the landscape points about Natural England. So yes, they did initially have kind of a holding objection where they said that they had serious concerns about the application. That was when we first came to committee back in April. We did defer it on that basis, along with to allow for extra correspondence between the applicant and Natural England to address these points and to make changes to the scheme that were made. And I believe that there were site visits undertaken by Natural England with landscape experts. Changes were made, landscape, which included removing certain fields from polytunnels that would be particularly visible in certain views. The additional landscape measures that have been put in place that are also considered to mitigate and to break up and bring additional benefit from the scheme. And those landscape measures are all going to be part of the landscape ecological management plan, which will need to be submitted to the council and is for us to then decide in consultation with Wildlife Trust, with Natural England. I believe Councillor Darcy has also requested that he would be very keen to see that document, which is certainly something that we can do. That's something that's going to be agreed, and that condition has been run past, as all the conditions have been run past the enforcement team to ensure that they are robust and enforceable. And I think, Chairman, that just about covers off comments that I've got, unless there are any further comments. Otherwise, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alex, for your wise words. Councillor Denis, HGV movements, is that still something that you're interested in proposing an additional condition?
Yeah, if I can, thank you. Let me come back, Chair. Couple of things. I think Alex said the condition was 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. That's the wrong way round. I think I think Councillor Gell said 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. So you got it the wrong way round. I didn't raise enforceability. You said I raised enforceability. Actually, I didn't. What I read was from page 44, which said the previous one talked about landscape management, and it didn't appear to have worked so far. Just to confirm, Alex, that obviously you've accepted that you haven't attended the heritage sites. Did the heritage team attend the sites, or have we done this as a desktop exercise? Because if that is the case, I'm not sure we can really consider what the impact is on those heritage. And to go to your question, Chair, I think the hours that were suggested, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., I think are appropriate. I know on Dunsfold Park for many years there was restrictions on the amount of lorries that could go in during the night because of the impact on the community. So it has been done before, and I would support that. But my colleagues may have a different view, and that's for them to decide whether they support that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So, Councillor Townsend.
Sorry, I just wondered, Chair, whether or not, as Zach is in a box on the screen, whether or not we could perhaps ask him about the traffic management plan and for his view, as Alex was saying about possibly recommending not to do that. I would like perhaps a second opinion on that. And I would say that it would be very difficult sitting in this chamber here to unilaterally perhaps put a time limit on it, because on the as much as I appreciate what Councillor Gale and also Councillor Denis have said, I am aware that we do not have the facts of the impact on the business that would have, and whilst at the moment there is operation, obviously from 5 o'clock apparently, there may be a better phasing plan, a blanket sort of removal of any kind of deliveries or facility would perhaps impact the business to an extent that we're not aware of in this chamber at this particular moment in time. And I just wanted to say that. So perhaps looking at a plan would be a better option, which would be able to holistically look at the whole site and the traffic in that area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I agree with that. Zach, may I ask for your advice on this matter?
I'm grateful you have, Chairman. I've had my hand up on the screen for the last 5 minutes, trying to get in. So thank you both. I've heard a lot tonight about the traffic implications, and Alex, has set out quite clearly that the recommendation from County Council is that, ostensibly they feel that the impact on highways would not be severe, and so they've suggested that that they don't believe a condition is required. But equally, they have said that should the members be minded to add a condition, they have set out how that could be framed, and you'll see that from the update sheet. I must admit, I'm in two minds. I don't think it's unreasonable to put a condition on. I think my only slight reticence would be around enforceability, in that we can't man the roads 24/7, and if a HGV does breach what they've agreed, it's very difficult to control that. Having said that, I think actually requiring the applicant to put in a transport HGV delivery management plan will actually exercise their mind at the start of the process that it's an important issue that should be addressed, and at least they would be setting out what is the optimum in terms of that matter. And yes, enforceability may be an issue, but if I were pushed, I would say, given the concerns that are being raised about highways, if I would be minded to say that if members were so minded to put the condition on, I certainly wouldn't be strongly objecting to that. Can I put it that way?
Thank you, Zach. So you're, just to clarify for my adult brain, you are suggesting that we may be interested as a committee in recommending a condition to have an HGV delivery or transport plan.
As set out on the update sheet.
Without being specific ourselves about that, but requesting such a thing as a condition.
For our approval, for officers to peruse in conjunction with county highways and confirm. So yes, it would be, the wording on the update sheet. I won't go through the whole thing, but it's that the proposed extended season shall not be commenced until and unless an HGV delivery management plan to include X, Y, and Z has been submitted to and approved in writing by local planning authority. I think I do appreciate that. In terms of the tests of conditions, enforceability might be an issue, but equally, the concerns around highways issues locally are genuine and understood. And I think, on balance, if members felt that was necessary to make the application acceptable, as I say, I won't be coming back to argue.
Okay, thank you, Zach. Councillor Dinas, are you minded to agree with that?
Thank you, Zach, for that. I think an HGV management plan, the only thing I would ask is maybe the local ward members, I'm not the local ward member, are kept in the loop on that, so they're part of the discussions. That's the only additional. Other than that, I'm happy to do that and withdraw it with that condition in those terms. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, that's absolutely fine with us. Yeah, we'll ensure that happens if that does go ahead like that.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Councillor Dinas. Councillor Wilson, the last word.
I'm going to be very quick because that last little chat, I was going to raise the recommended traffic management plan on the end of the update, which seems quite sensible to me. And also, I was going to say that enforcement, I think, can be done through the local councillors, because I'm very sure you're going to get a phone call quite quickly if an HGV goes thundering past your door at the wrong time. So if we adequately publicise that there is a time when they should not be there, I feel that our residents will do the job for us. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor Reid, I missed you out. And then Councillor Gale, you want to come back. So, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I've got notes that I made when it was deferred the last time, so I'm going to read from two lots of information. This is a farm. Farms in the countryside are still industrial. We can't all expect a Gainsborough-esque picture-perfect countryside with pastoral scenes. This is a living, working farm. And I just wanted to say, in answer to the comments that Councillor Townsend made, if we're going to have a policy to control movements, we have to think about all the berries that need to go to market. And unfortunately, we have no railway lines in this area, or not many, that used to take all the fruit and vegetables to market in London. I just wanted to make that point. The other point I'd like to make is the fact that this is an industrial establishment, and we have to recognise that. Now, we all want and like to eat blueberries with our breakfast, strawberries while watching tennis, and these are all the berries that, as a country, we're demanding. After Brexit, we're not going to be able to pay the fortune that we're going to have to face importing all these wonderful berries to satisfy demand. So I think we should support farms just like this. In fact, I've read masses of documents on this, and I found this Secretary of State screening direction very helpful that was written by Tom Mills on the 25th of June. I've underlined an awful lot, and I wanted to come back to Councillor Denis because it says the Secretary of State has considered the information before him and concluded that the proposed development would not likely cause adverse impact to the heritage assets in close proximity. And there are many more little gems in this particular document. I really would advise everyone to have another look at it. I downloaded it and printed it off. I also would like to thank Zach Elwood, our Head of Planning, for reiterating the fact that although this farm is changing the landscape, it's a temporary thing and it doesn't alter the designation, just like an ancient woodland remains an ancient woodland. So this land is going to be in perpetuity a farm with all the designations of the area surrounding it and in it. And the benefits, the economic benefits to our country with this farm are going to be far outweighing the objections that a lot of people have put forward. And we have to support British farming. The whole of this document is about environmental impact assessment. That's why I'm recommending everybody reads it, because, these are the experts. I don't think I've got anything more to say, but I was very pleased to see that AONB, and I'm on that board representing everyone here, and Natural England advised on all matters ecological, and they're satisfied that the proposals will not require an environmental impact assessment on the basis of ecological grounds. And really, I really think we should all support it, and I certainly will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, I do have, after the last word with George, I have two more councillors who wish to speak. Councillor Gale, you want to come back, and then Councillor Darcy. I would ask you both to be as swift as possible.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, the traffic management plan, which I saw earlier today, actually did say about peak times, AM and PM, which I believe is like school run times, but I would like the night time to be included if we can. Thank you.
Councillor Darcy?
Yes, just very quick, really. On page 44, it says, in the first paragraph, legs and hoops would remain through winter on those fields proposed to have tunnels on them the following year. So my question is, given that the plans are not submitted, because what they have to do, they have to submit a plan to say what next year's planting is going to look like to us. They submit that on the 31st of November, but the legs and hoops are supposed to be removed on the 1st of November. So that leaves a month in which nobody will know whether or not those legs are entitled to be there. And I think that's a bit of a loophole.
Well, I suppose there are lots of loopholes in tunnels, aren't there? But
Might I come back on that, Councillor Chairman? Sorry, yes, thank you. Just to kind of clarify that, so yeah, the current arrangement at Tuesley is that a plan is submitted to us each year, showing us where the polytunnels are going to be sited. That's not proposed this time because the hoops, so the 66.2 hectares that of fields that have been considered as suitable and been put forward as suitable, the 60 hectares that are proposed or that will then have tunnels on them, of that 60, the 40 that will be the sheeting will be removed over those 5 months. We don't mind which of those 60 hectares or 66 hectares are then used again next year, if that kind of makes sense. So there's no requirement for them to submit any details to us. It's just that we have to make sure that they don't exceed the limits. Apologies if that's confused things further, but hopefully there's some clarification in there.
So
thanks, Alex.
Just slightly confused me, because does that mean no legs and hoops ever have to be removed, or does that mean they will be removed but you just don't know where they should be removed from, and therefore you wouldn't possibly be able to enforce anything?
So between we get to October, and then there may well be 60 hectares of polytunnels on the site. 40 hectares of that will then need to have the sheeting removed over the winter down period. So through the winter down period, which is going to last 5 months, they will be allowed to have 20 hectares of permanent polytunnels, and then feasibly an additional 40 hectares of hoops on the site. Just for those, if they're going to be used again the next season, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand that. I think maybe I'm not getting my point across. Some of the hoops will be in areas where they shouldn't be, because unless they're allowed to have hoops in all the areas that they could possibly put polytunnels, there will be some areas where they should remove them. Or am I wrong? Can they just leave them up everywhere? Is that the argument?
The hoops can remain, yes.
Throughout, covering all the fields that they could possibly use.
That's right.
Permanently.
Within those 40 hectares, yes. So, yeah, I think the answer to your question is yes.
Okay, but that's a substantial change from the current situation, so I think that should have been made clear in the papers.
Any comment, Alex, on that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, no more speakers. I'm assuming now that we will move to resolution of this. The recommendation by the officers is that permission be granted, subject to conditions 1 to 16, which I presume is now 1 to 17 with a traffic management plan, and informatives 1 to 8. Members...
Excuse me, Chair. Excuse me. Does that include my informative for the liaison group?
1 to 9. Thank you very much. Anytime you want to sit up here, there's, I'd be very happy to swap.
Just ask.
Thank you. So, yes, the recommendation by the officers is permission be granted, subject to conditions 1 to 17 and informatives 1 to 9. Please show by raising your hands those in favour of this.
Thank you.
And those against this?
What are we voting on?
That permission be granted subject to conditions 1 to 17 and informatives 1 to 9. So, against 2? And abstentions? 1 abstention.
Thank you, Chairman. That's 11 for, 2 against and 1 abstention, so it's carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, members. Members, if you so wish, I'm happy to give you a 5-minute rest and relaxation before we go on to the little tiddly bits. Can we hold?
Chairman, the council chamber's on mute.
Yeah, Kim. There we are, sorry. There we are, yeah.
Okay, so we're back now to item 9 on the agenda, applications not subject to public speaking. First one of 3, WA 2021-0124 at 1 Hoe Lane, Hascombe. The proposal here is erection of extensions and alterations to existing dwelling to form 2 dwellings and associated works following demolition of existing garage and conservatory as amended by plans received 3rd of March 21 and further amended by plans received 15 June 21. And Tracy is going to tell us all about it. Tracy.
Thank you, Chairman. Share the screen. Ooh. The application before you is for the erection of extensions to provide an additional dwelling, as the Chairman's just described. You will likely remember this scheme from the June Committee, where it was deferred to seek additional information relating to residential amenity. Since you saw this scheme last, there have been some minor amendments, which include the reduction in width of the single-storey rear extension, bringing it away from the shared boundary by 800 mm. And also internal arrangements, alterations, resulting in the new dwelling being a 2-bed rather than a 3-bed, as previously proposed. The application is sited within the rural settlement of Hascombe, on the western side of Hoe Lane, a minor residential road branching off of the western side of the street, Hascombe. At present, the application site hosts a 2-storey 3-bedroom dwelling with parking to the front for 1 vehicle and amenity space to the front and rear of the dwelling. The property is an end-of-terrace dwelling featuring a single-storey side element, once a garage, but since converted into habitable accommodation. Permission is sought for a 2-storey side extension following the demolition of the single-storey former garage, to form a new 2-storey 2-bed dwelling. Extensions to the rear would increase the ground floor area, whilst at the roof level of what is the existing dwelling, a rear dormer would facilitate the 3rd bedroom being moved from the ground floor to the 2nd storey. Officers consider that the design is in keeping with the character of the area. The internal space and layout accords to national space standards. The existing parking layout for the dwelling at number 1 Hoe Lane, which is a 3-bedroom dwelling, provides 1 off-street car parking space. The proposed parking layout of this development provides 3 off-street parking spaces in total for the 2 dwellings, which provides 2 spaces for the new proposed 2-bedroom dwelling, which is in accordance to Waverley's parking standards, and keeps the existing provision for the 3-bed dwelling as per the existing arrangements. Sorry, I've breezed over the site photos. The site photos show the existing dwelling from the front, side and rear. The key matters for consideration are Greenbelt development within the rural settlement and the parking provision, visual amenity and residential amenity. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tracy. Do I have any speakers on this? Councillor Cotter.
I'm sorry, I have a real problem here, Chairman, and the problem is that I do recall us discussing this before, and I do recall us asking some questions. They may or may not have had something to do with visual amenity and overlooking and 45 degrees, and that may have been a different application. Could we just be told or reminded what our concerns were before and how the amendments may or may not have addressed them, because that's the central issue for me.
Okay, Tracy or Kat, could you help remind our memories?
So the key matters for consideration last time was the parking provision, being the reason that it was brought to committee. at committee, it transpired that the single-storey rear extension hadn't been assessed in terms of the 45-degree angle and the impact that that would have on the neighbouring property number 1, Hoe Lane. So those are the key matters for consideration. If I share my screen again, I will take you to the relevant parts and point out the amendments made. So here we can see that whereas before the single-storey rear extension, it came up to the boundary, therefore it would have not been in accordance with the 45-degree angle. However, on balance, we would have probably said that that was acceptable anyway. The applicant has gone ahead and made this amendment from their own accord without us asking them to make this. So therefore, it presently stands that single-storey rear extension is in full accordance with the 45-degree angles, which therefore basically demonstrates that there would not likely be any impact upon light. And in terms of the parking, internal alterations, have reduced the capacity of the new dwelling, which would utilise this area of the existing property. Well, that's not correct. This will be demolished, and the extensions will form a 2-bedroom dwelling, of which the parking is proposed as 2 cars for that dwelling, which leaves the parking provision as currently exists for the 3-bedroom dwelling that would remain. I think that answers the question.
Thank you, Tracy. Councillor Goodridge.
Thank you, Chairman. I do remember why we adjourned this last time, and my concern was the relationship with the neighbours and the fact that the 45-degree, we couldn't really see where the back wall was of the neighbours and how it related to the single-storey extension at the back. And I think the improvement to the plans since our last meeting has totally satisfied me of the concerns that I had through not really understanding how it was going to work between the 2 buildings, and I now do understand how it works. It's been improved, and so far as I'm concerned, I'm now happy with it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gray.
Thank you. Can I just have confirmed, so the 3-bedroom property is going to have 1 car parking space, and the 2-bedroom property will have 2 car parking spaces? And the rationale for that is that they're assuming the 3-bed is the existing, which only had 1, so that's acceptable. Is that a fair reading of it, Tracy?
Tracy?
Yes, so at present, the dwelling is a 3-bedroom dwelling. It has living accommodation and bedrooms on the first floor, and 1 bedroom which is contained in what was a garage, since converted into habitable accommodation. What they're doing basically is they are moving that 3rd bedroom from ground floor up to the 2nd floor within the roof space, and then the parking provision does remain as 1 for that dwelling, and then the new dwelling has 2 parking spaces as per the current Waverley parking guidelines. Getting into the realms of seeking parking provision for existing dwellings would be unreasonable.
Thank you, Tracy. Councillor Gray.
If I could just come back on that, I think it's quite difficult to comprehend that when they're turning a site into two houses, making so substantial changes to it that we can see one as being existing. And to me, this is replacing a single dwelling by two dwellings. And therefore, why should the standards not apply to both of those dwellings? Had they knocked them down and built that, then that surely would be the case. I'm just a bit flummoxed by that.
Tracy, your view?
I think we've been satisfied, and also Highways are satisfied that that the parking is acceptable for the site.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So that's 10 for, 2 against and 2 abstentions, so it's carried.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Sorry, we can't hear the debate.
Button pressed, sorry about that, thank you very much. WA 2021-0082, Heathfield, Thursley Road, Alsted. The proposal is extension and alteration to rear single and 2-storey extension and existing conservatory with new vehicular access as amplified and amended by email and plans received 18 March 2021 and 25 March 2021. Well, are we going to be helped by Wanda Jamke?
Evening, members. The proposal here has been.
Wanda, I'm afraid you are breaking up quite a lot, actually.
Can you hear me better? I speak up.
Rather difficult, Wanda, I'm afraid. I know that you can only come in over audio.
What's the picture? I've tested this before. It's usually all right.
It's pretty difficult, Wanda, I'm afraid. Kat, are you there to be able to help out?
I can talk you through the plans if that's helpful. I'm afraid my commentary will be brief. But I can talk you through if that's easier.
Kat, yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, Chairman. Next slide, please, Kim. The application site is located on the east of Thursley Road and currently comprises a 2-storey detached dwelling with a single-storey element to the rear. I should just make members aware that this application is coming before the committee because the agent is an elected member, so it is not fall within our delegation. If I can go on to the next slide, please, Kim. Here's just an aerial view to show the application site in context. So it is the site in the centre there, surrounded by the open grounds. Next slide, please. So these are some photographs taken of the front of the property and the view of the property from the Thursley Road at the moment, obviously behind the hedging. Next slide, please. And again, this is the access. The access would be altered to provide a new access onto the highway. Next slide, please. And again, these are just some photographs to show you the context of the site. So the top left, I believe, is the front elevation behind that hedging that you saw on the Thursley Road. And we have some side elevations and views of neighbouring properties. Next slide, please. And again, just some further photographs of the site. Next slide, please. So as you can see, these are the existing floor plans of the ground floor and first floor, with the single-storey additions to the rear and side there. Next slide, please. As you can see, there would be some ground floor additions to the rear, as well as some alterations at first floor level to provide an additional bedroom above. Next slide, please. So this is to indicate where the new access to the parking area would be provided from the Thursley Road. Next slide, please, which I think should be the technical plan to show you the new access. So I'm afraid that the drawing is quite well annotated there, but essentially what that drawing shows you is a new vehicular access onto the Thursley Road, together with the relevant sight lines and the existing area, which would provide parking and turning. Next slide. Thank you. Again, this is just some more information with regards to sight lines. The County Highway Authority are satisfied that adequate sight lines can be achieved from this access onto the Thursley Road. Next slide, please. So as I say, members, this application is before you this evening because it cannot be approved under delegated authority. The key considerations are design and impact on visual amenity, impact on residential amenity, and impact on highway safety. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Kat. Do I have any speakers on this? Councillor Coster?
I have absolutely nothing to say about the application, Chairman, but could I just very gently point out that someone seems to be using on this and the next application the wrong front sheet template, and much as I would be pleased if we were still the Central Planning Committee, we're not.
Thank you for that. In which case, members, I think we move to a vote. Officer's recommendation is that permission be granted subject to conditions 1 to 8 and informatives 1 to 4. May I see by show of hands those in favour? Thank you. And those against? And even I can do the sums. Any abstentions? All right. Thank you very much.
Just to confirm, Chair, that's a majority vote for, so it's carried.
Thank you. Right. And moving on to our last one this evening, B3, WA 2021-0513, 8 Foxdean, Godalming. The proposal is alterations to elevations with attached garage conversion into habitable accommodation. Kat, oh, Wanda, you're back online. That's.
I'm going to attempt it by telephone. Is that? Can you hear me?
Yep, that seems to be working very well. Thank you.
Right. So we're dealing again with an application that falls outside the scheme of delegation. Because Beth will have hopefully left by now, but this relates to an agent related to a Waverley Borough Council staff member. So the address is 8 Foxdean. It's a very, very minimal application, so we could just flick through the slides quickly. We have a proposed garage conversion, And the location you'll see is in a residential area. If we go to the next slide, please. We can see the site location. It's slightly west of Godalming College. We move to the elevations. Perhaps. We move to the next slide, please. Well, the proposed floor plans here show you where there's a family room and a garage. And on the first floor, that will be converted to a kitchen, diner or breakfast room. The next slide, please. I think we'd have to go back one to the elevations. I'm not sure why that's gone. One back. Oh. So, I don't know what to do about the elevations because they should have been in there, and I don't know how I've managed to delete them. But what we're talking about is one garage door being replaced by one window to match the existing window in the family room.
Wanda, members tell me that they have it in their printed papers.
That's a relief. So the matters for consideration are really impact on visual amenity and residential amenity. There's no overlooking because there's no fault form. Additionally, there's one extra window, but it has the same view from that window as existing. There's no overbearing effect because there's no additional fault form. So there's no harmful impact. The visual amenity, well, the matching windows will fit in, and there will be one less car parking space. But there is sufficient parking on the forecourt of the dwelling for there to be no harmful impact on the parking in the area. So the recommendation is for approval.
Thank you. Thank you, Wanda. Any speakers? No, in which case we can move to a vote. The recommendation is that permission be granted subject to conditions 1 and 2 and 1 informative. Members, wait for it. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. And those against and abstentions. Thank you very much.
So that's a majority in favour, Chairman, so it's carried.
Thank you very much. Members, you've all done very well. Thank you very much. See you next time.